"Naomi, don't do this." Marcus said it quietly, almost under his breath. Naomi's fingers stopped halfway to her glass. Across the table, Derek was already laughing. He had spent the last 5 minutes telling his new girlfriend little stories about Naomi, stories that sounded harmless, until you noticed the way he watched her while telling them. "She was always a little sensitive," Derek said with a grin. "You had to be careful with her." Naomi looked down. 6 years ago, that sentence would have made her defend herself. Tonight, she said nothing. Marcus noticed. Derek didn't. He leaned back in his chair, apparently enjoying the attention, and then glanced at the man sitting beside his ex-wife. "So," he asked casually, "how long have you two been together?" Naomi finally looked up. There was something almost strange about the calmness in her face, because Derek still had no idea who the man beside her really was, and he was about to say something he would wish he could take back. "Welcome to Mr. Hartley's story. To everyone who has supported this channel, thank you for being part of this incredible journey. We're growing every day, improving every day, and bringing you even better content ahead. If you're new here, comment below and tell us where you're watching from, and make sure you subscribe to officially join the family. Now, let's begin today's story." Naomi kept looking at Derek. He was smiling as though he had walked back into a chapter of her life that still belonged to him, but Marcus was sitting beside her, one hand resting calmly near hers, and Naomi knew something Derek didn't. He hadn't met the woman she had become. He had only remembered the woman he had left. Derek turned toward Lauren and chuckled. "You know, Naomi and I didn't exactly have the easiest marriage." Naomi's eyes lowered for just a second. Then Marcus gently touched the back of her hand. She looked at him, and for the first time that evening, she didn't feel the need to explain herself. Naomi kept her hands folded beneath the edge of the table. Derek was still smiling. His girlfriend, Lauren, looked from him to Naomi, then to Marcus, trying to understand what kind of history had just been placed in front of her. Marcus didn't say anything. He simply looked at Naomi. That was one of the things she loved about him. He didn't rush to fill silence just because it was uncomfortable. 6 years earlier, Naomi would have been desperate to do exactly that. She would have smiled too quickly, explained too much, tried to make everyone comfortable, even if she was the person sitting there uncomfortable. Now she took a slow breath. "We've been married a little over a year," she said. Derek's eyebrows lifted. "Married?" Naomi nodded. "Yeah." He looked at Marcus again. For the first time since walking over, Derek seemed genuinely caught off guard. Marcus offered his hand. "Marcus." Derek shook it. "Derek." Their hands separated. Lauren smiled politely. "I'm Lauren." "Naomi." "I know," Lauren said, then gave a small embarrassed laugh. "Sorry, I mean obviously." Naomi smiled. It was almost normal. Almost. Marcus reached for the breadbasket and nudged it toward Naomi. "You wanted that, right?" She nodded. "Thanks." Derek watched the exchange. "You two seem pretty comfortable." Naomi looked at Marcus. "We are." There was no pride in her voice, no attempt to make a point, just an answer. That seemed to bother Derek more than she expected. He leaned back. "Well, that's good." Naomi picked up a piece of bread, but her appetite had disappeared. The strange thing was that she had genuinely been happy 5 minutes earlier. She and Marcus had been arguing about whether the dessert they ordered had too much chocolate in it. Marcus insisted there was no such thing. Naomi had told him that was exactly the kind of opinion a man with no self-control would have. He had laughed. She had laughed. It had been ordinary. That was what Naomi loved most about her marriage now. Ordinary didn't scare her. With Marcus, disagreement didn't automatically become a threat. She could say, "I don't like that," without preparing herself for a lecture. She could change her mind. She could be quiet. She could even be wrong. Marcus didn't seem to need her to lose an argument before he felt okay. And Naomi had slowly learned to stop apologizing for taking up emotional space. Slowly, not completely. Sometimes Marcus would ask, "Why are you saying sorry?" And she'd realize she didn't know. "Habit," she'd say. He never laughed at her. He'd just nod. "Okay." Then he'd move on. That simple acceptance had done more for Naomi than either of them understood at first. Now, sitting across from Derek, she found herself wishing she could borrow some of that calm. Derek glanced toward Lauren. "We were married for 4 years. Lauren looked surprised. Really? Yeah, Derek smiled. Long time ago. Naomi looked down at her plate. She knew that smile. She had once spent years trying to understand what it meant. Now she knew. It meant Derek was deciding which version of the past he wanted to tell, and Naomi had a feeling she wasn't going to like this story. Derek picked up his glass. So, what brought you on this cruise? Anniversary, Marcus said. Derek looked at Naomi. Your anniversary? First one, he smiled. Well, congratulations. Thank you. Lauren touched Derek's arm. We're celebrating too. Derek nodded. Our first trip together. Naomi smiled politely. That's nice. The conversation should have ended there. It didn't. Derek leaned slightly toward Marcus. So how long did you know Naomi before you got married? Marcus looked at Naomi for half a second. About 3 years. Derek's expression changed. 3 years. Yeah. Huh. Naomi could almost hear the calculation happening behind his eyes. Derek had always liked knowing the timeline of other people's lives. Where they lived, what they earned, who they knew, how long they had been together. It had once made Naomi feel like he was interested. Later, she understood that sometimes he simply liked having information. So you knew her pretty well before marrying her, Derek said. Marcus smiled faintly. I'd say so. Derek laughed. Well, then you probably know what you're getting into. Lauren gave him a quick look. Derek. What? She shook her head. Nothing. Naomi's fingers tightened around the napkin. Marcus noticed. He always noticed. Derek continued. She used to worry about everything. Naomi looked at him. I don't think Lauren needs our marriage history. Derek lifted both hands. I'm just talking. Okay. That was all Naomi said. Derek studied her. 6 years ago, she would have followed that with an explanation. She would have said she wasn't trying to be rude. She would have explained why certain subjects made her uncomfortable. She would have tried to make sure he didn't misunderstand her. Now she simply looked at him. That seemed to unsettle him. You've changed, he said. Naomi gave a small shrug. People do. He smiled. Still careful with your words, though. Marcus's eyes moved toward Derek. Naomi felt the old instinct rise in her chest. Say something. Defend yourself. Don't let him think he's right. But she didn't. She took a sip of water instead. Derek leaned back. You know, it's funny seeing you like this. Like what? Relaxed. Naomi didn't answer. Derek laughed softly. You weren't exactly known for relaxing. Lauren shifted in her chair. Maybe we should let them enjoy their dinner. Derek glanced at her. We're fine. Naomi looked at Lauren. For the first time, she felt a strange sympathy toward her. Lauren didn't know Derek's history with Naomi. She only knew the man sitting beside her, the charming man, the confident man, the man who probably told stories well. Naomi wondered how many of those stories were true. Derek looked toward Marcus again. So what do you do? Marcus answered. Derek listened. Then he nodded, as though filing the information away. Naomi watched him. There was something about the way he looked at Marcus that made her uneasy. Not jealousy, not exactly. Something closer to assessment, as if Derek was trying to figure out whether Marcus was someone he needed to take seriously. Naomi suddenly wished they had never sat down. Then Derek turned to Lauren and said almost casually, You know, Naomi always had a hard time handling criticism. Naomi stopped breathing for a second. There it was. The story had begun. Lauren looked uncomfortable. Derek. What? He said. I'm not saying anything bad. Naomi stared at him. Derek smiled. You always were sensitive. The words landed harder than she expected. Not because they were new, because they weren't. Naomi had heard variations of them for years. Too sensitive, too emotional, too much, too difficult. She had spent a long time wondering if maybe Derek had been right. Marcus shifted in his chair. Naomi felt his knee brush hers beneath the table. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Derek continued. She'd get upset over little things. Then we'd spend an hour talking about why she was upset. Lauren glanced at Naomi. I'm sorry. Naomi smiled faintly. It's okay. Derek laughed. See, that's what I'm talking about. Naomi's smile disappeared. What? You do that. Do what? That. He waved his hand toward her. The quiet thing. Naomi looked at him for a moment. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Marcus finally spoke. Derek. Derek turned. Yeah? Marcus's voice stayed calm. Maybe leave it there. Derek's eyebrows rose. I wasn't talking to you. I know. The table went quiet. Naomi looked at Marcus. He wasn't angry. That somehow made the moment more serious. Derek smiled again, but this time there was tension behind it. I'm just telling Lauren what marriage was like, Naomi said quietly. Your version. Derek's smile faded. What does that mean? It means I remember it differently. Lauren looked down at her plate. Derek leaned forward. Of course you do. Naomi felt heat rise into her face. For one terrible second, she was 29 again, standing in their kitchen while Derek told her she was making another issue bigger than it needed to be. She almost apologized. The word reached her lips, then stopped. No, she wasn't there anymore. She looked at Derek. I don't want to talk about our marriage. Derek stared at her. Then he laughed, still avoiding difficult conversations. Naomi's fingers curled around the napkin. Marcus looked at her. Not Derek. Her. That was enough. Naomi stood. I need some air. Marcus immediately started to rise. No, she said softly. I'll be okay. He paused, then nodded. Okay. Derek watched her walk away. Naomi made it halfway across the restaurant before she heard him laughing behind her. She didn't turn around, but she heard Lauren say something quietly. Then Derek answered, and although Naomi couldn't make out every word, she heard one sentence clearly. I told you, she always does this. Naomi stopped. Her hand rested against the railing overlooking the lower deck. For years she had believed the hardest part of leaving Derek was losing the marriage. Standing there now with the music from the restaurant behind her and Marcus still sitting at that table, she finally understood what had actually taken so long to heal. It wasn't the divorce. It was how easily Derek's voice had become her own. And behind her, Derek was still telling the story as if he had never lost the right to tell it. The first time Naomi met Derek, she liked that he seemed certain. They were at a friend's birthday dinner in Charlotte, and Naomi had spent most of the evening listening more than talking. Derek noticed that. You always this quiet? He asked. Only around people I don't know. He smiled. Good answer. She laughed. Back then his confidence felt easy to be around. He chose restaurants without making it complicated. He knew which direction he was going when everyone else was still looking at the menu. When Naomi second-guessed a decision, Derek usually had an answer. She found that reassuring. It took time to notice that he also expected his answers to become hers. The first few disagreements were small. Naomi wanted to spend a weekend with her mother. Derek had already made plans. You can see her next weekend. I told her I'd come. He sighed. Why does everything have to be difficult with you? Naomi changed her plans. Another time, she told him something he had said at dinner embarrassed her. He looked genuinely confused. You're still thinking about that? It bothered me. You're overthinking it, she tried explaining. He interrupted. Naomi, not everything needs to become a conversation. She stopped. There were moments when Derek was kind. That made everything harder to categorize. He brought her coffee when she worked late. He remembered little things. He could make her laugh when she was tired. If Naomi had told someone he was a bad man, she wouldn't have believed herself. The problem was what happened whenever she needed something he didn't want to give. An apology, a compromise, an uncomfortable conversation. He would become irritated, and somehow the subject would change from what had happened to how Naomi had reacted. You're getting emotional. You always take things the wrong way. I can't talk to you when you're like this. Eventually, Naomi started preparing before she spoke. She rehearsed simple sentences in her head. She removed words that might sound accusing. She softened requests until sometimes they barely sounded like requests anymore. And when Derek still became frustrated, she assumed she had said them badly. By the second year of their marriage, Naomi could tell from the way he put his keys on the counter whether he wanted conversation or silence. She knew when to wait. She knew when not to ask. She knew when an apology would end an argument faster than an explanation. She didn't notice how much of herself she was editing until one night she caught herself standing in their kitchen, trying to decide whether she was allowed to be upset. Derek was watching television in the next room. Naomi had a question she wanted to ask. She decided not to. That decision felt easier, and that was when the habit became part of her. The argument that ended their marriage began with a bank statement. Derek had made a financial decision without telling Naomi. When she found out, she waited until they were home before bringing it up. "You should have told me." Derek didn't look away from his phone. "I knew you'd make it a whole thing. It's our money. I handled it. That doesn't mean you get to decide by yourself." He finally looked up. There it was again, that expression, not anger exactly, annoyance, as though her objection was more inconvenient than the decision itself. "Why do you always have to challenge everything I do? Because we're married." He shook his head. "You're exhausting." Naomi went quiet. Derek continued before she could answer. "Maybe somebody else can deal with all this, but I can't." The sentence stayed in the room long after he walked away. A few weeks later, they were separating. There was no dramatic discovery, no screaming match in front of neighbors, just lawyers, forms, boxes, awkward conversations, and the strange business of deciding who got what from a life that had once belonged to both of them. Derek seemed relieved. Naomi wasn't, not because she wanted him back. She simply didn't know what to believe anymore. If Derek was right, maybe she had asked for too much. Maybe she really did make ordinary problems bigger. Maybe she should have been easier. Those questions followed her after the divorce. Derek moved on quickly. Naomi learned to sleep on one side of her bed again. She stopped checking whether someone was upset before speaking. Then, slowly, she started doing it again. It was almost embarrassing how long Derek remained present without actually being there. A disagreement with a friend could make her wonder if she was being difficult. A difficult conversation at work could leave her rewriting what she had said. Sometimes she heard his exact words in her own thoughts. "You're making this bigger than it is." 6 years later, standing on a cruise ship listening to Derek tell Lauren that Naomi had always been sensitive, she understood why the words had reached so deeply. He wasn't telling her anything new. He was pressing on something that had never completely stopped hurting. And Naomi hated that she still cared. Marcus entered Naomi's life without trying to fix it. That mattered. They met through mutual friends, and their first few dates were unremarkable in the best possible way. He asked questions and actually waited for answers. He disagreed with her sometimes. Naomi noticed that immediately. The first serious disagreement came months into their relationship. Marcus had made a decision about a shared expense without discussing it first. Naomi confronted him. "I wish you'd asked me." He looked at her. "I should have." She waited. That was usually when Derek would start explaining why she was making too much of something. Marcus rubbed his forehead. "I don't think we're actually arguing about the money." Naomi frowned. "What are we arguing about?" "I don't know yet." She almost laughed. "You don't?" "No." He gave a small shrug. "I think we're both annoyed. We should probably figure out why before we start saying things we'll regret." Naomi sat back. It was such an ordinary response. Yet she didn't know what to do with it. They talked, not perfectly. Marcus got defensive once. Naomi shut down twice. They misunderstood each other and had to start over. But nobody threatened to leave. Nobody told Naomi she was too much. Nobody demanded that she prove she had a right to be hurt. Over time, she became less careful. She still had habits. She sometimes apologized when she hadn't done anything wrong. Sometimes Marcus would catch her saying, "Sorry, and he'd interrupt gently. "Why are you apologizing?" She'd stop. "I don't know." He'd nod. "Okay." Then they'd keep talking. Their relationship grew through ordinary things. Bills, family disagreements, bad moods, laughter in the kitchen, forgotten errands, apologies, and the occasional argument that neither of them handled particularly well. Marcus wasn't perfect. Neither was Naomi. But she never felt that love depended on winning. When he eventually asked her to marry him, Naomi cried before she answered. Not because she had finally found someone who could save her. Because she had finally reached a place where marriage no longer felt like something she had to survive. She could enter it as herself. And for Naomi, that was worth more than any promise. By the time Naomi returned to the restaurant, Derek had found a second wind. He was telling Lauren another story. Naomi slowed before reaching the table. And I'm telling you, she could turn one little disagreement into a 3-hour conversation. Lauren laughed politely. Derek saw Naomi. See? Perfect timing. Naomi sat down beside Marcus. I thought you were done talking about me. Derek smiled. We're just catching up. We haven't caught up. The smile on his face held. Lauren looked between them. I was just asking what you two were like. Derek answered before Naomi could. She cared a lot, sometimes too much. Naomi looked at her plate. Marcus didn't move. Derek continued. She needed reassurance about everything. If I didn't answer a text right away, she'd wonder if something was wrong. That isn't what happened, Naomi said. Derek turned toward her. See? Lauren frowned. What? That. He pointed lightly toward Naomi. She always corrected the details. Naomi's jaw tightened. I corrected you because you're telling things that aren't true. Derek laughed. Okay. He looked at Lauren. You see what I mean? Lauren didn't laugh this time. Derek seemed not to notice. He described an argument from their marriage, leaving out what had started it and emphasizing only Naomi's reaction. Then he told another story, then another. Each one made him look patient. Each one made Naomi look unreasonable. The restaurant wasn't silent, but Naomi could feel people at nearby tables beginning to glance over. Derek seemed to enjoy it. He was relaxed now, leaning back with his drink in his hand. So honestly, he said to Lauren, when we finally split up, I was exhausted. Naomi looked at him. He shrugged. I think we both knew it wasn't working. Marcus's eyes moved toward Naomi. She kept hers on Derek. You were the one who said I was exhausting. Derek's smile weakened. I said things. You meant them. I was frustrated. So was I. Derek took a sip. Well, you're doing better now. Naomi waited. Then he added, marriage must agree with you. Lauren looked at him. Derek. What? That sounded. She stopped. Derek laughed. I'm complimenting her. Naomi knew better. He wasn't complimenting her. He was reminding everyone at the table that he believed he had once been responsible for surviving her, and somehow that was worse than the insult itself. Derek wasn't finished. He brought up an argument from their second year of marriage. Naomi remembered it clearly. Derek remembered only the part that made him look patient. You remember that trip to Atlanta? He asked. Naomi's stomach tightened. Lauren smiled faintly. What happened? Derek looked pleased. She got upset because I changed dinner plans. That isn't what happened. Derek lifted a finger. Here we go. Naomi felt the words gathering before she could stop them. She wanted to explain. She wanted Lauren to know. She wanted Marcus to know. She wanted Derek to stop rewriting something that had happened inside a marriage Naomi had actually lived through. But then she looked at Derek. He wasn't trying to understand. He was waiting for her to react. Naomi closed her mouth. Derek frowned. What? Nothing. You were about to say something. I changed my mind. He laughed. You always do that. Marcus leaned closer to Naomi. Do you want to leave? She looked at him. For a second, she considered saying yes. Then Derek spoke. She's fine. Marcus turned toward him. I asked her. Derek's expression hardened. I know her. Marcus nodded. Okay. That calm answer seemed to irritate Derek more than an argument would have. Derek leaned back. Look, man, I'm not trying to cause a problem. Good. I just know what she's like. Naomi felt her chest tighten. Derek looked at Marcus. She can be great, but when something gets to her, it really gets to her. Marcus said nothing. Derek smiled. You'll figure that out eventually. The words hung there. Lauren looked uncomfortable. Derek, maybe that's enough. He ignored her. You'll learn. Marcus finally put his glass down. Learn what? Derek shrugged. Nothing. No, you said I'll learn something. Derek smiled. I lived with her for 4 years. Marcus looked at Naomi, then back at Derek. And I've known her for 3. Derek's expression shifted. There was something in Marcus's voice that hadn't been there before. Not anger, certainty. Derek glanced around. A couple at the next table had stopped talking. Lauren lowered her eyes. Naomi suddenly wished the conversation would disappear. Instead, Derek gave a short laugh. I'm just warning you. Marcus leaned back. I don't need a warning. Derek stared at him. Naomi knew that look. Derek had finally realized he wasn't controlling the room anymore. Derek looked at Marcus again, then at Naomi. Something seemed to click. You two have been together 3 years? Marcus nodded. Derek's eyes narrowed. And married? Naomi didn't answer. Marcus did. Yes. Derek blinked. What? Marcus kept his voice even. She's my wife. For a moment, Derek simply stared at him. Lauren looked at Naomi. You're married? Naomi nodded. Yeah. Derek leaned back slowly. Wow. No one spoke. Then he laughed once, awkwardly. I didn't know. I know, Naomi said. Derek looked at Marcus. So you've heard everything? Marcus shook his head. No. Derek smiled. I'm sure you've heard plenty. I've heard enough. That answer wiped the smile from Derek's face. What does that mean? It means Naomi doesn't need me to build a case for her. Derek glanced toward Naomi. She probably told you her side. Marcus nodded. She told me what she wanted me to know. And you believed it? Marcus paused. I know her. Derek scoffed. You've known her 3 years, and you've been divorced from her almost 6. The sentence landed quietly. Derek looked away. Lauren touched his arm. Maybe we should go. Derek stood, but before leaving he looked at Naomi. There was no smile now. You really changed. Naomi held his gaze. I had to. Derek seemed about to respond. Instead, he walked away with Lauren. Naomi watched them disappear into the crowd. She expected relief. It didn't come. Marcus waited. Finally, he asked, You okay? Naomi nodded, then shook her head. I don't know. He didn't push. She looked down at her hands. He still gets to me. Marcus was quiet. Naomi swallowed. That bothers me. Why? Because I thought I was past it. Marcus reached across the table. Naomi let him take her hand. She stared at their fingers. There was something she hadn't expected to admit, even to herself. All these years she had imagined what it would feel like if Derek ever realized he had been wrong. She had imagined an apology, maybe even regret. She had never imagined that when the moment finally came, it wouldn't feel like victory. It would feel like discovering she had been waiting for something she no longer needed. And that realization frightened her more than Derek's insults had. Naomi and Marcus didn't go back to the restaurant. They found 2 empty chairs near the quieter end of the deck, away from the music and the crowd. Naomi sat down. Marcus stayed beside her. For a while, neither said anything. Finally, he asked, Do you want me to say something? Naomi looked at him. I don't know. Okay. That answer almost made her smile. She rubbed her thumb against the edge of her wedding ring. I hate that he got to me. Marcus leaned back. Why? Because I thought I was done with all of that. You don't have to be done with something just because 6 years passed. Naomi looked toward the water. I should have said something. You did. Not enough. Marcus shook his head. You don't have to win a conversation with him. She looked at him. I wasn't trying to win. I know. Then why does it feel like I lost? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Because he got you thinking about yourself the way he used to. Naomi looked down. That was exactly it. She hated how easily Derek had brought back an old version of her. Marcus reached for her hand. I can stand next to you, he said, but I can't go back and fight every argument you had with him. Naomi gave a small laugh. I wouldn't ask you to. I know. He squeezed her hand once, and I don't want to fight him anyway. She looked at him. Why not? Because this isn't about me. Naomi stared at him for a moment. Derek had spent years making everything about who was right. Marcus was doing something completely different. He wasn't trying to defeat Derek. He wasn't trying to prove that he was the better husband. He was simply sitting beside Naomi while she worked through something that belonged to her. I think part of me wanted him to admit he was wrong, she said. Marcus nodded. That's understandable. What if he never does? Then he never does. Naomi looked at her wedding ring again. For some reason, that answer felt more freeing than reassurance would have. She didn't need Derek's agreement to know what had happened. She just hadn't realized it yet. Lauren found Naomi the next morning near the coffee station. Can I ask you something? Naomi turned. Sure. Lauren looked nervous. I don't want this to be weird. It already is. Lauren laughed softly. Fair. She glanced toward the hallway. Derek's not here. Naomi nodded. Lauren took a breath. Was he really like that? Naomi knew what she meant. She didn't answer immediately. Derek wasn't awful every day, Naomi said. Lauren seemed surprised. Naomi continued. That would almost be easier to explain. Lauren listened. He could be funny. He could be thoughtful. He could be very good to me sometimes. Then what happened? Naomi looked down at her coffee. Whenever I was hurt about something, the conversation somehow became about why I was hurt. Lauren frowned. I don't understand. If he said something that bothered me, he'd tell me I was too sensitive. If I got upset, that became the problem. After a while, I started spending more time figuring out how to bring something up than figuring out whether I should bring it up at all. Lauren was quiet. Did he ever hit you? No. Cheat? Not that I know of. Lauren nodded slowly. So it was. Small things. Naomi paused. Small enough that I kept thinking I was imagining it. Lauren looked away. That's what he's doing with me sometimes. Naomi didn't react. Lauren immediately added, I'm not saying he's the same. I understand. They stood there for another moment. Then Lauren asked, why does he still talk about you? Naomi gave a tired smile. I don't know. But she had a feeling she was about to find out. Later that afternoon, Lauren confronted Derek. You embarrassed her. Derek looked up. I was joking. You kept going after she asked you to stop. She always says that. Lauren stared at him. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Derek frowned. You've known her for 1 day, and I've known you longer than that. He went quiet. Lauren crossed her arms. Why do you care so much what she thinks? I don't. Then why are you still trying to prove she was the problem? Derek opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Lauren shook her head. You don't have to answer me. She walked away. Derek stayed where he was. For the first time since seeing Naomi on the ship, he wasn't thinking about what she had done wrong. He was thinking about why he needed everyone else to believe it. Naomi was alone when Derek found her that evening. She was standing near the railing, looking out over the dark water. Can we talk? She didn't turn around. About what? Earlier. Naomi looked at him. There were a lot of earlier moments. Derek sighed. I didn't mean to embarrass you. But you did. I know. That stopped her. Derek looked uncomfortable. I don't know why I kept doing it. Naomi waited. He looked toward the water. When I saw you yesterday... He stopped. What? You looked happy. Naomi said nothing, and I didn't expect that to bother me. Why would it? I don't know. He rubbed his jaw. I spent a long time believing we ended because you were... He stopped again. Because I was what? Difficult. Naomi nodded slowly. And now? Derek looked at her. Now I'm not sure. That was the closest thing to honesty she had heard from him all night. Naomi folded her arms. You didn't leave me because I was impossible to love. Derek looked down. You left because you didn't want to keep having conversations where you weren't in control. He didn't argue. That was what surprised her most. His face tightened, but he didn't tell her she was exaggerating. He simply stood there. Finally he said, Maybe. Naomi waited for more. There wasn't any. She realized she didn't need it. You hurt me, she said. I know. I spent years wondering if you were right about me. Derek swallowed. I'm sorry. Naomi looked at him. The apology was quiet. No excuse followed it. She could have stayed, could have asked questions, could have demanded details. Instead, she nodded. Thank you. Then she turned toward the stairs. Naomi. She stopped. Derek looked like he wanted to say something else. He didn't. She walked away. Naomi realized something had changed. Derek had finally admitted that he might have been wrong, and strangely she didn't feel the need to hear anything else. The next morning, Derek found Naomi near the breakfast area. He didn't sit down. Can I say something? Naomi looked up from her coffee. Okay. He kept his hands in his pockets. I owe you an apology. Naomi waited. I shouldn't have talked about you like that. No. Derek nodded. I know. He looked uncomfortable. I kept telling myself that our marriage ended because you were difficult. It was easier that way. Naomi said nothing. I didn't have to think about what I did. She looked at him. Derek continued. Seeing you on this ship, happy with Marcus, it messed with that story. Naomi lowered her eyes. I could have handled that differently. You could have. I know. There was no argument left in him. He glanced toward the dining room. I embarrassed you because I wanted Lauren to see me as the reasonable one. Naomi gave a small nod. At least you're honest now. Derek swallowed. I am sorry. She believed him. That didn't erase anything. Thank you, she said. He looked relieved for half a second. Then she added, but I'm not going to pretend this fixes everything. I don't expect you to. Naomi folded her hands around the coffee cup. I hope you become a better man, Derek. He looked at her. But I don't need anything from you anymore. His face changed slightly. Not anger, something closer to acceptance. I understand. He walked away. Naomi watched him go. She expected to feel triumphant. Instead, she felt lighter. Not because Derek had finally admitted he was wrong, because she no longer needed him to. Later that afternoon, Naomi and Marcus sat together near the back of the ship. The coastline was getting smaller behind them. Marcus had 2 coffees. He handed one to Naomi. You've been quiet. I know. You want to talk? She smiled. Maybe. He waited. Naomi looked down at the cup. I've been thinking about us. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That sounds dangerous. She laughed. See? That's why I married you. My job. I know. She took a breath. I think that's what I finally understand. Marcus waited. You gave me enough room to figure myself out. He nodded slowly. Naomi stared toward the water. I spent years trying to prove Derek wrong. Even after I left him, I thought if I became successful enough, calm enough, happy enough, then somehow that would prove he was wrong about me. Marcus didn't interrupt. But yesterday, she stopped. Marcus waited. I realized I don't have to prove anything to him. He smiled. No, Naomi looked at him. I still hate that some of what he said hurt. Of course it hurt. I thought you'd tell me not to let him bother me. I was thinking about it. She laughed. Good. Marcus leaned back. But I don't think pretending something doesn't hurt makes it disappear. Naomi nodded. They sat quietly. Then Marcus said, You know you don't have to become somebody else to make me happy, right? The need to add anything. Marcus took her hand. Naomi leaned her head against his shoulder. The ship continued forward. Behind them was a man who had once made her question whether she was too much. Beside her was a man who never asked her to be less. And Naomi finally understood the difference. When the cruise ended, Naomi expected to remember Derek. Instead, she remembered Marcus laughing over breakfast. She remembered the stupid argument about dessert. She remembered sitting on the deck with her husband and realizing she could tell him the truth without rehearsing at first. That was what stayed with her. Not Derek, not Lauren, not the restaurant, not even the apology. The cruise had simply exposed something Naomi hadn't fully noticed before. She had already built a life Derek no longer had access to. Derek left the ship carrying his own questions. Naomi never learned exactly what happened between him and Lauren afterward. She didn't ask. For the first time, his next chapter wasn't her concern. Back home, life returned to normal quickly. Laundry, work, groceries, a sink full of dishes. One Tuesday morning, Marcus suggested they try a new coffee shop. Naomi disagreed. No, their coffee is terrible. Marcus looked offended. You went once. Exactly. He laughed. You sure? Naomi looked at him. Yeah. Marcus nodded. Okay. She smiled. Then she caught herself. For years, disagreement had felt like something that needed repair. She had expected to soften her answer. Apologize. Explain. She did none of those things. Marcus went back to his coffee. Naomi picked up her phone. That was it. No dramatic moment, no perfect ending. Just an ordinary morning in a marriage where Naomi no longer felt she had to disappear to keep the peace. Derek had once convinced her that being loved meant becoming easier to handle. It took years for Naomi to understand that she wasn't difficult because she had feelings. She had simply spent too long with someone who didn't know what to do with them. And the cruise didn't give her a new life. It showed her how completely she had already built